So I moved to the Abbey in January of 2013, and it's coming up to the 5-year mark. So I thought it was time for a report card, and I wanted to reflect on what I've learned at the Abbey for the last 5 years. It's not a report card of me, it's of the Abbey. The other one we don't have to do. So when I first moved here, the first thing we started to learn in terms of the weekly teaching series, back then Venerable was teaching us once a week. We were covering the Mind and Awareness series, where we were learning about the Buddhist philosophy of the mind and the different kinds of consciousness we have, how to move them from wrong consciousnesses to yogic direct perceivers. And then shortly after that, Venerable plunged into this beautiful text called Aryadeva's 400 Stanzas. She was helping to prepare us for teachings by Geshe Yeshe Tabke. And at first I remember she said she would only teach the first 4 chapters, but we wound up learning all 16, and it was really a marvelous 1 year or more journey. And then after that, we started to get into Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, which is 500 verses of advice from Nagarjuna to a king, all about how to work with your ethical conduct that supports your realization of emptiness. So we went through that also for about a year or so. And then thanks to our friends in Singapore, they requested teachings on the Lamrim. So Venerable started to give teachings twice a week. So she started to teach on Fridays on the Lamrim. As you well know, we are now studying the Gomchen Lamrim, by a great meditator. But before that, we did a text called Easy Path to Omniscience, and that was very much focused on meditating on the Lamrim. So Venerable brought us through that whole series. So that was just the weekly teachings. And then I was thinking about all the series that we've covered in the BBC talks. Like I mentioned earlier this week, I'm always very amazed that Venerable does one little verse a day, and suddenly we finish 108 verses. So over the years, we have looked at Essential Spiritual Advice by the first Dalai Lama, Gems of Wisdom by the 7th Dalai Lama, Essence of a Human Life by Lama Tsongkhapa. Can we remember those texts? Anyhow. And we've also had retreats throughout the year. Oh yeah, every Sharing the Dharma Day, we covered Don't Believe Everything You Think, which is a commentary on the 37 practices of Bodhisattvas. Also over the course of 3 years, I think we finished that text. We've been studying Buddhism, One Teacher, Many Traditions, now the 3rd installment this year. Venerable has been teaching us on how to see yourself as you really are. When I first moved here, I had the wonderful opportunity to help edit the text, Wheel of Sharp Weapons, which has now become Good Karma. So it was wonderful to spend time with that text. And then we have our Vinaya class every week or so, and we have a nonviolent communication class. So that's just the sort of within the community. Yeah, and then we've also had guest teachers come to lead retreats. Dhammo Kusho Sakya, Dagri Rinpoche, Geshe Tabke, Geshe Dadul, Guy Newland, and Jeffrey Hopkins has been teaching us Cutting Through Appearances, which is about the Buddhist philosophical tenet systems. Yes, and we have to add too, that we have Exploring Monastic Life every year, and also Young Adult Week. I love that program. I aged out, unfortunately. And every year during the Deity Meditation Retreat, we also go through a text. I wasn't here for 108 verses of compassion, but I was here when you went through verses from Sublime Continuum for the Tara Retreat, and that was a real treat. Please teach us on the text. So that's just what we've covered in terms of formal Dharma study over the last 4 or so years. So, when it looks like the Abbey doesn't have a, quote, formal study program, with classes like that, but just look at the amount of ground we've covered. I'm quite amazed just looking at the list. And I think what's very beautiful is that we don't have exams. So that's given us the time to process the teachings. I mean, we approach them in a totally different way. Yeah, we're not like, oh, got to study for the quiz this weekend, and then, it's integrated into our meditation, into our lives, and often Venerable will link it to current events that are happening at the time. So we see how these ancient teachings relate to modern circumstances. So that's the formal Dharma study part. And then every year we sit 3 months of silent retreat, which is a big piece of why I chose to ordain here too. It's incredibly rare. I would say in most Asian monasteries I know of, there's just to even get away to do a short retreat somewhere is extremely rare, because you're often 1 or 2 monastics at a center ministering to 200 people, and they all have their needs, and you have to be at, so many different events and guide the group, right? So to have these 3 months that we have every year is an incredible privilege. So when I first moved here, we were looking at the 4 establishments of mindfulness, so I had the opportunity to hear those teachings. Then the next year we did the Vajrasattva Ngundro, which I struggled with for a whole year beyond the 3 months. And then we got in touch with Manjushri. we did the Refuge Ngundro, and last year we did the Guru Yoga Ngundro, which I didn't complete, and I'll tell you why later. And then we've also done the Chenrezi practice almost every year for a while. When we have a 1-week deity meditation retreat, and then we've also explored other deity practices, and we've also done the Nyungne. So I love that we have time like this to really dig deep into the afflictions. You know, it takes almost 2 weeks just to even get the mind a bit quiet. Yeah, then we can really start looking at what's going on. So in the 3-month retreat, I think our practice starts to go deeper, and we have the time to integrate what we've learned formally into our experience. So that's the Dharma part, the meditation part. And then through offering service, I think I've learned so many things here that are inconceivable to me. When I first saw, I'm just going to make a list of all the things that I learned skill-wise that I never thought I would ever do. When I first moved here, I was, the video person left. So I was on crutches recovering from a car accident, and they said, "Can you make videos?" Okay, I'll try. So from there, I started to learn how to make videos. I never cooked before I moved here, couldn't even peel a carrot, but you know, everyone gets in the kitchen. So I remember I apprenticed myself to everyone in the community for about 2 weeks. And that was really a great way to get to know the community. You see how people are under pressure when cooking. So it was fun. And everybody taught me a special skill or their own favorite dish. I still can't make mashed potatoes, but you know, I've seen Venerable Sultrip do it. And then I learned to make a website, which was not really by choice, but you know, we had to migrate Venerable's website onto a new platform. So I found myself learning WordPress with many volunteers. I had this hallucination that I would not get in touch with technology after moving here. You know, like, oh, it's gonna be like, I don't have to be in touch with the world that way. I'm gonna just meditate, and not quite. So I found myself, you know, learning WordPress and interacting with all these people online. A big challenge to my identity was learning how to work outside, because so much of my education has been intellectual and academic. And I think the whole first year of Venerable, Samke had to drag me kicking and screaming into the forest. It was terrifying for someone who grew up in an urban environment. You know, I lived on the 15th story most of my life. Like suddenly we're like with trees, like what do you do? So she was very patient and guided me through. I got rotated into the garden and got fired very quickly. But anyhow, I learned from Venerable Chuni lots of wonderful things, like how to turn soil, how to plant, how to cover tomatoes with blankets in the middle of the night before the frost comes. That was quite fun. But why I got fired was because I couldn't tell the difference between weeds and vegetables, and I managed to weed the entire garden when Venerable Chuni was away. Yeah, I wrote her very pleased with myself, and she was like, do not weed the garden now, you can't tell the difference. It was too late. So anyhow, after that, I joined the weed control team to learn how to identify weeds. So it was very fruitful, and I've been on that team with Venerable Samten, who has imparted the ropes. But why the real highlight this year, though, of being part of weed control team is learning to drive a tractor. I think never in my life have I thought I would learn to drive a tractor. And I want to say Venerable Samten was incredibly patient. You've been driving a tractor for a couple of years that's been rented. I want to point out that this is a very reliable lineage of former school teachers who are learning to drive the tractor. And she did it with lots of love and care. Venerable Samten is standing at the far end of the field while I'm putting around on a flat surface, and she's just standing there watching to make sure that I don't fall off and kill myself. You know, waving where I should turn, and yeah, so I thought it was very kind. And of course she did all the difficult slopes. But anyhow, that was also why I didn't finish my Guru Yoga Ngundro, because on the day I learned how to drive the tractor, I was so excited that I forgot to do my commitments that day. It's quite sad, but yeah, I will pick up again. So that's driving the tractor. I also had to learn to drive a car. I'm not going to say too much about it. It's really not my favorite activity. I passed. We can get from point A to point B. I can get you to the hospital. Yeah. Yeah, oh, don't even mention that. I couldn't make it to the post office recently. Anyway, I've also learned how to translate classical Chinese, which was quite enjoyable. It was comforting to learn that most people read it word by word, even the Chinese who know Chinese. Yeah. So it was an arduous process, but you know, again, with the kindness of many people, especially in Taiwan, supporting that process. And this year I had the opportunity to go and learn Tibetan at my Tripa College. And of course, all of us have the opportunity to share the Dharma at the UU through the Sravasti Abbey Friends Education Program. So, just learning all these practical skills through offering service. And it was a good way for me to work with my idea of who I thought I was, who I think I am. Yeah. But too, it gave me a lot to think about how we often don't value practical skills in our education system these days. Yeah. I think I was talking to Venerable about this. It's like, I can't change a light. I don't know how to change a light bulb. I don't know how to clear this, the sink if it's clogged, things like that. But these skills are not valued, it seems. Yeah. So this is just a list of the external stuff, I guess, the measurable items that I feel that I've experienced and learned over the last 4 years. This is, it's hard to even tell you what I've learned about my own mind, just being here, what we learn through living in the precepts, what we learn through living in community. I think you get a taste of it, right? Bumping up against each other and having to really apply the antidotes to get through the day. And of course, we learn a lot from living with our spiritual mentor and receiving direct feedback. You get the report card every day. So I wanted to bring this up because I was reflecting on this and I realized, I went to this very fancy pants school that remains #1 in the US News College rankings, and it costs almost $70,000 a year to go there. And I will say that hands down, I have received a better education here at Sravasti Abbey than my 4 years of college. It's free of charge. And it's something that no amount of money can buy. So you should call 1-509-447-5549 today.